Hey everyone, Reaper here again with another video. This time I wanted to talk a little bit about books or series that we may have sold off for whatever reason at the time, but now are starting to bring some of these issues, some of these titles back into our collections. Okay, for whatever reason, right? So for this video, I wanted to concentrate on The Walking Dead. A little history about The Walking Dead and me goes back all the way to when the show first aired. Now, I did not know, even though I was a comic book fan, but at the time when the show came on, I was really far removed from collecting comics. It wouldn't be another couple of years before I actually came back to the hobby full swing. But anyway, when the show first started in 2010, I didn't know it was a comic book series. And I shortly found out it was a comic book series. But me and my wife, we really enjoyed it. We watched the show as soon as it came on, back in 2010, I believe. Can't believe it's already been 10 years, right? So we've been big fans of it, and we eagerly waited season 2, and we really enjoyed it and started following the series very religiously. Now, it wasn't until 2013, into 2014, I came back to the hobby, came back to comic book collecting. And I think around that time, it might have even been a little bit farther down the road, where Walking Dead, the TV series, was really hitting a fever pitch. It was really doing well. You had The Talking Dead that would come on right after The Walking Dead. You had Walking Dead conventions. I mean, this series, I would dare say, has been one of the most successful modern comic book series. Right up there, I think, well, maybe not necessarily, it's not considered modern as it is Copper with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It just seemed to have captivated so many people. I think Turtles has a bit of, don't get me wrong, let me correct myself before I start getting the hate. I think the Turtles have more longevity than The Walking Dead, obviously, right? But I do think that The Walking Dead was a phenomenon. I know there's still some people that watch the show. Let me, jump to the present now. I don't watch the show. I stopped watching the show maybe around season 4, season 5, because after a while, like with most of those George Romero zombie movies, it's the same story over and over again. You know, you have the big bad, whomever that is. They beat the big bad, lose some people along the way, and then another big bad shows up, and it's the same thing over and over again. I mean, movies are pretty much the same thing over and over again, but when it came to The Walking Dead, that was, around that season, around that time on the show, that's when I said, okay, enough's enough. It was pretty much shortly after that Terminus thing. I forget what season. Was that season 5? I think that was season 5, right? After the prison was destroyed and they all left and they found Terminus, and then they took revenge against them in the church and all that stuff. Right around that time, I stopped watching. And every now and then, I would catch an episode when Aaron showed up, when, the whole battle between Hilltop, and when Negan first showed up. But I think shortly after when Negan showed up, I think the series started to see a decline in ratings and all that. But regardless, I still think, like I said a few moments ago, the show was a phenomenon. Anyway, let's get to the books, right? I started collecting some of the Walking Dead books again. Now, some may say, well, that's not necessarily, I'm not saying these are investments, okay, because I don't think they are. So why are you buying them? Well, I didn't buy the number 1 again. For those of you that watched Comic Book Haul number 3 from all the way back in October 2014, I was able to secure 2 copies of Walking Dead number 1. Both were 9.4s, and both variants of it. One had the white print, mature readers, and one had the black print, mature readers. I prefer the black print personally. I think it looks cooler for whatever reason. But regardless, I had those, and I had really a bunch of great Walking Dead books, as you would see through comic book hauls. I forget the numbers, but quite a few comic book hauls after number 3. I was getting more and more books. I got Abraham and the priest, like I mentioned before. What was his name? Father Gabriel, and all that. So I was a big fan, even though I stopped watching the series not long after that, I believe, or around that time. Still enjoyed the comic and all that. So recently, I started collecting these again. And like I said a few moments ago, they're not necessarily because they're investments. I mean, I don't have a number 1. I don't plan on getting a number 1. I don't really have an interest in getting number 1 anytime soon, or a 2 or a 3, because those tend to be the most expensive of the series. And there's quite a few that are still kind of pricey because of certain characters or print runs or whatever. But the reason why I started collecting them again is obviously because I liked the series. I think it's a pretty cool series. And because a lot of them have gone cheap. Now, maybe some of you watching, I can't predict what's going to happen with these books next month, next year. But I've noticed that some of these books, although some of them can still be pricey, like the number 1, number 2, 3, some of those earlier issues that have lower print runs or who have introduced some pretty popular characters, even though they may have been killed off somewhere down the line, early down the line, still pretty popular characters. Some of them still retain a decent amount of value. But even with the number 1 and many others, I've noticed that a lot of them have gone down in price. Again, I'm not saying that they're going to continue to go down or whatever. I don't mean to anger anybody that put their heart and soul in collecting these books and managed to get that number 1 and all that stuff. I'm not, trying to be disrespectful to them. But I have noticed that a lot of these books have sort of gone down. Some of them went down slightly, and some of them, I think, tanked. Now, we could look on eBay and we could look up some of these books, and you could say, hey, this book is still selling pretty well. Sometimes it does. But a lot of times when you're not looking at sold listings, people put these outrageous prices because that's what they'd like to get. Doesn't necessarily mean that's what they're going to get. But I managed to get a decent amount of these books. Now, I'll show one of them in this video, but I'm mainly saving them for future comic book hauls. They'll be spread out through 2 comic book hauls, in addition to my regular comic book collecting of some DCs, Marvels, upgrades, whatever it may be. But I'll show you one in this particular haul. But yeah, I've noticed that some of them gone cheap, and I think they're probably going to get a little cheaper because I think this is the last season for Walking Dead. So even though Walking Dead does have that spin-off show, Fear of the Walking Dead, and I think they're having another spin-off. I forget what it's called. But I do think some people are getting Walking Dead fatigue. It's starting to, go down. I think that's mainly why the show is coming to an end, why the ratings, I think, have suffered a bit over the last couple of years. May not necessarily be because of poor storytelling, but it's just, after a while, it is kind of the same thing over and over again. Yes, we do go see movies that are essentially the same thing over and over again, but in long-standing series where you're doing that over and over again, the series does suffer because of that. I think, at least. I could be wrong. But I managed to pick up quite a few, but very cheap. Very cheap. And I'll give you an example. Now, this is one book that I never had in my original Walking Dead collection, like I was mentioning earlier with comic book haul number 3, and I think even comic book haul numbers 1 and 2. I forget which one. There were a couple of Walking Dead books. I think in particular the first appearance of Dwight, the first appearance of Negan. I think those were in the first two Walking Dead, first two comic book hauls. I forget which one. Maybe they were both in one of them. I don't know. It's a while ago. It's over 6 years ago. But this is a book that at my Walking Dead collection's peak, I never had. And I always wanted to get, but I just didn't want to pay what it was going for back then. Back then, even though the character and the story had passed early on in this TV show's lifetime, in early part of season 2, first half of season 2, even though this character and this storyline passed, like I just said, the book was still fetching a decent amount of money. And what I mean by decent amount of money for a high-grade copy, you know, could be anywhere between 50 to $100. And I just didn't want to spend that. So recently I was able to buy this for $20. And it's a nice high-grade copy. And I thought, hey, I'm coming back to collecting some of these. I'm not going to try to get them all, but I wanted to get a couple of these, and this is definitely one I wanted to pick up because I never had it before. Walking Dead #9. I think it's one of their best early covers. They've had a lot of great covers. Don't get me wrong, but this is really great. I've always loved this cover. You know, the dead eyeball and Rick in the sights. It foreshadows what happens to Carl at the end of this. This is the first appearance of Otis, and this is where Carl gets shot by Otis accidentally. I believe because there was a deer nearby and Otis was hunting deer but didn't see Carl, and the bullet not only went through, I think it went through the deer and Carl, or might have missed the deer. I don't know. I have to look at it again. But that, as you know, was the very first episode of season 2, when they're all on the highway and they're looking around and Carl sees the deer and he's going up to it, and all of a sudden, boom, the bullet goes through him. And that's when we're introduced to Otis, and then later in the next episode we're introduced to Herschel, which follows this with issue 10, the first appearance of Herschel and the Green family and the farm and all of that. Really good storytelling, I thought. Really good early Walking Dead stories. I enjoyed them very much in the comics as I've read them, and I enjoyed seeing their interpretations on screen. But yeah, I just managed to get that nice 9.6 copy for $20. Maybe that's what a 9.6 is going for. I don't know. But I've noticed that some of the books that I picked up, some of the books that I was able to bring back to the collection, I got much cheaper than what they were, what I bought them for, or what they've been going for at the peak of Walking Dead's popularity years ago. And I've managed to get almost all the ones I've purchased in higher grades. I had high grades before, but these were even higher. These are more like 9.4s, 9.6s, where my original copies were like 9.0s, 9.2s, maybe an 8.5 or an 8.0 around there, you know, for a modern book, you know, 8.0. But I was just happy to have the book back then. But yeah, I was able to pick up some of these much cheaper. So the point is, I just started bringing them back because I like the series and they're cheap. And I think they might even get a little cheaper. I think there's room where after the series ends, some of these books might go down even lower. So if you're a Walking Dead fan, but you've always been turned off by spending $50 a book, $100 a book, $75 a book, depending on the character, depending on the book and all those things, but you said you would like to get into this when the prices go down. I think the prices have been going down for a little while now. And I think they might go down a little lower. So now might be, or a little later, might be a really good time to start picking up some of these books. I think it's still, like I said in the beginning of this video, a pretty good series to collect for. So, what series or books, issues, whatever, have you sold off for whatever reason in the past that you said to yourself, one day I'd like to bring back, or are in the process of bringing back? I'd be interested in reading about that in the comments. Take care, everyone.